race theory is not taught in elementary school. It is barely taught in law schools, frankly, in the level that it should be taught.
Critical race theory is not being taught in schools, is what we're being told over and over again. That it's something only taught in law school, if that. No one is teaching it in public schools, not to children, especially not to white children. Except, of course, when people admit that it is being taught in schools. But even then, they'll defend it by saying it's not about teaching white kids that they're racist and privileged. It's not about trying to demonize white people. It's just about teaching the true history of America, warts and all. That the racist systems and structures of America that were built by white people, of course, need to be torn down.
Looks like it's time for another teachable moment with Ms. Magoo. Critical race theory. Critical race theory is not teaching our white children that they are bad or racist. No, critical race theory is literally unwhitewashing our curriculum. It's teaching the history of this country, warts and all. My posts really seem to get under your skin, and I highly suggest that you stop being willfully ignorant and start educating yourself. Some great places to start would be by watching the documentary 13th, the documentary I Am Not Your Negro, reading How to Be an Anti-Racist, and this one might be especially important for you, reading White Fragility. So until white people, and especially white men, start stepping up and doing their part, these systems and structures are going to stay in place. We need to tear them down.
Well, this crazy lady, who is a teacher, by the way, says we should look into White Fragility, which was written by Robin DiAngelo, as a means to educate ourselves in terms of critical race theory. Well, let's listen to a few things Robin DiAngelo has said.
I was socialized to see race as individual acts of discrimination and prejudice, individual acts that anybody could do to anybody else, and if you did those acts, you were a bad person. And that is why, since I saw myself as a good person, I didn't see myself as connected to racism, and certainly didn't see myself as connected to race. In other words, I didn't have a sense of a racial identity. Today I understand that I move through the world always and most particularly as a white person. I have a white frame of reference and I have a white experience. And part of being white is to have that be invisible to us and to be able to live our lives without ever acknowledging that, to see that as non-operative. I now understand racism as a system, as a deeply embedded system, a system that our country was founded on and that all our institutions were created out of.
So I'm just going to put it right out here. As a result of being born and raised as a white person in this culture, I have a racist worldview. I have deep racist biases. I have developed racist patterns.
So here we have Robin DiAngelo saying that the systems and structures of the United States are the very basis of what racism is. That as a white person, born into the culture created by these systems, white people have a racist worldview, racist biases, and racist patterns. So this is who the crazy teacher lady said to check out to inform ourselves. Because Robin DiAngelo is one of the foremost people spreading the ideology of critical race theory. And this is one of its core tenets, that white people are racist because they benefit from these racist systems, whether they're aware of it or not, which is what the concept of white privilege is, that you have the privilege to benefit from these systems. And due to that, every white person is racist. That white people have an unconscious bias that is just ingrained in them. Doesn't even matter if you're woke or not.
If you're white, yes, you are racist. Even if you think you're woke, we all benefit from oppression. Pretending you're not racist only makes racism grow.
So to combat this racism that every white person is afflicted by, white people can't just stop being, racist. They have to, as Ibram X. Kendi puts it, be anti-racist. That to be anti-racist is to recognize your privilege as a white person. To understand the fact that you are a racist, and once recognized, start using that privilege to tear down the systems of power in service of liberation.
I mess up frequently. I say things that are racist. I say things that are racially coded. I do things that cause harm, and I'm going to continue to. And that is because I am a white person living in a racist society. And I think, again, the more that white people can really practice, and I don't mean to extend to practice, there's an urgency and a necessity to doing this work. This is racial justice. The more that we can wrap our heads around the fact that we act in racist and white supremacist ways a dozen times a day without even being aware of it, that's when we can begin to really begin to deconstruct what that means and unpack what that means in the service of liberation.
With the realization that, as a white person, you're a horrible racist benefiting unjustly from a system of power that oppresses all the non-white people. Does it matter if you're a white person struggling to make ends meet, while millionaires like Oprah Winfrey and LeBron James get to go on television and complain about how racist you are? You're the oppressor. You're the one benefiting from your whiteness. And once you've been properly taught these things through so-called diversity trainings disguised as Mao struggle sessions, once you've accepted your lot in life as an oppressive white person, you're supposed to experience your white guilt. And the only way to get rid of it is to turn it into an effective anti-racist action. You're to turn into a proud ally. In other words, an activist for the revolution that is meant to overthrow all these racist systems that you benefit from for the liberation of all.
So why don't Republicans want us to learn how to not be racist?
This is why we don't want to teach anti-racism in schools, as this is one of the primary ideological worldviews of critical race theory, from some of the very people teaching it and writing about it. This is what we're being told is not being taught in schools, that it's just about teaching kids about race, which is bad enough already. That's not what schools should be doing. But if that's all it is, talking to kids about race and about the history of slavery in America, etc., then why are some of these woke teachers getting so upset when they're told they can't teach critical race theory?
This is what's bullshit. Today is the first time our country has recognized Juneteenth. It's a national holiday, and yet I'm getting ready to go back to school in the fall, and my governor has put into place some ridiculous legislation that many governors across the country have put into place, such as I can't teach anything divisive, I can't teach critical race theory, and I can't teach about racial equity. This is at all public schools, colleges, and universities. So, teachers, in the past, we've been activists. After the shit show of last year, we really need to stand up and do what's right for our kids right now. So, this is a call to action, teachers. We gotta stand up and fight for our kids because this is bullshit.
So here is crazy teacher lady being upset she can't teach critical race theory, that she can't teach about racial equity, which is also another concept from CRT. And as she pointed out, she and other teachers that she probably knows and networks with are indeed activists. She's calling for them to stand up and do what's right by their kids. That is a call to action. Because that's what she really is. She's not a teacher. She is an outspoken activist that is indoctrinating the kids that have been put in her care in order to turn them into activists themselves.
Let me tell you a little bit about the population of my school. 51% of my students are Latinx, and many of them are undocumented, and many more have parents who are undocumented. So when they come into my classroom and see signs that say no human is illegal, they don't need to know who I voted for. I don't need to tell them. When my black students come into my classroom and see my Black Lives Matter posters, I don't need to tell them. When my LGBTQ plus students come in and see my pride flag, I don't need to tell them. Because they know that I have used my critical thinking skills and have decided to vote for whoever is on the side of fighting for human rights. So no, I don't need to tell them. because they know that I am using the privilege I was born with to fight for them, that I am an ally for them. So yeah, that's not political, that's human rights. I am part of the equity and racial justice team at my school district and have been mentoring students of color who have been leading these changes in our district. They have implemented new curriculum that is unwhitewashed. They have gotten rid of police in our schools to help eliminate the school to prison pipeline. And they have created workshops. I'm also an immigration activist. I have gone on and organized many different protests. Ever since I became a teacher and started working with and listening to the voices of my students of color, I realized that I had to take a stand and do something to fight for them. I needed to make this country a more equitable place for them.
And these types of activists have infiltrated schools all over America. And they openly declare themselves and the things they believe without any hesitation. Because from their point of view, they are totally in the right. They are being anti-racist allies that view their quest to liberate all the non-white people from the oppressive society they live in as an absolute moral endeavor. And if you're not going to teach your children about racism and about white privilege and so on, they'll do it for you. To the point where if you don't even believe in these concepts yourself, you shouldn't even be teaching.
If you don't believe that there's white privilege, please don't teach. If you don't believe that Black Lives Matter, please don't teach. If you don't believe in systemic racism and how it negatively impacts our students of color and don't want to help dismantle those systems, please don't teach.
So, despite all the corporate media propaganda and the lies from Democrat politicians that critical race theory is in no way being taught in public schools, the very teachers themselves continually talk about how they are racist and how they want to teach their students not to learn power and correctness from them because they're white.
Racism originates with and is perpetuated by white people. Learning Spanish from a white woman. I wish I could go back and tell my students not to learn power or correctness from this white woman. I would tell them to stand in their own power. White isn't right. We're deconstructing our emotions around acknowledging our whiteness and white privilege through the lens of grief and the process of grief. We talked about mourning our white morality. I'm holding myself accountable to this journey. Part of my accountability is to continue to struggle and grapple with my internalized white supremacy. Dismantling white supremacy in society looks like dismantling in my heart first. It means I'm not going to teach Spanish. Accountability is ongoing because there is no end to the process.
I would assume this is targeted at the non-white students, because she's not telling white students to not learn from her. She'd be telling her white students all the other nonsense she clearly believes of white people. She said it herself that racism originates and is perpetuated by white people. And these concepts are being taught in public schools by the teachers that have been trained to do so. They believe in the concepts themselves and are 100% committed to brainwashing their students into these ideas. And just as we see video after video of woke teachers proclaiming themselves to be racist while teaching kids about race, racial equity, white privilege, and so forth and so on, students themselves are beginning to reveal what they're being taught in classrooms by simply just recording their teachers.
Can we say white have power over black, please? Yeah. Okay, thanks. And we don't even have to pretend that it was during slavery times. Because if we were really just saying during slavery times, we wouldn't have mass riots even happening today, right this minute, because of another black person being shot unwarranted by police without being questioned, because, thought that was the taser. Oops. So we still have the binary of white have privilege over blacks. Okay. I know you're like my toughest class because I don't know how to read you guys. I really don't. All my other classes, I know how to read some of you. I don't know how to read all of you. And that's really frustrating. Okay, when I say the critical theories is where things get real. And yes, I said the S word before. Because it is. You can't tiptoe around this stuff. I am trying to stretch your brains in some uncomfortable ways to help you see that there are a lot of different ways to see reality and life and the things that you encounter on a daily, hourly, minute basis.
And if they're not recording it, children as young as 9 years old are now appearing before school boards to tell their stories about what they're being taught in classes and what is going on in their schools in regards to critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, and other woke progressive movements.
Here again. The other day I was walking down the hallway at Lakeview Elementary School to give a teacher a retiring gift. I looked up onto the wall and saw a BLM poster and an Amanda Gorman poster. In case you don't know who that chick is, she's some girl who did a poem at Biden's so-called inauguration. I was so mad. I was told 2 weeks ago at this very meeting spot, no politics in school. I believed what you said at this meeting. So at lunch, I went up to my principal to tell him about the BLM poster and that I wanted it down. He said it's not coming down. I was like, yeah, it is, because the school board said on May 25th, no BLM or politics in school. He said, that's weird. They were the ones who made them. I was stunned. When I was here 2 weeks ago, you told us to report any BLM in our schools. Apparently, you know they're in our schools because you made the signs. I said there should be no BLM in schools, period. It does not matter the color you make the posters and the font you use. We all understand the meaning. It is a political message about getting rid of police officers, rioting, burning buildings down while King Governor Welch just sits on his throne and watches. We all know. Changing the font or the color of posters does not change the meaning. I am 9 years old and I know that. You expect me to believe that you did not know what you were doing by making these posters? Come on, people. I do not judge people by the color of their skin. I don't really care what color their hair, skin, or eyes is. I judge by the content or the way they treat me. MLK said, I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That dream has come true. I do not care or look at the color of skin, but you make me think of it. I have Asian, Mexican, white, Chinese, black friends, and I don't care. I like them because some of them make me laugh, some are sweet and kind, sporty, or share the love of God. They are just my friends. You have lied to me, and I am very disappointed in all of you. You cannot even follow your own rules. If you're going to do that, why do we follow any rules we deemed unfit or ridiculous? I'm not following your mask rule anymore then. Get the posters out of our schools. Courage is contagious, so be courageous.
My name is Haley Asgard. I was in 4th grade at Riverview Intermediate School last year. During distance learning, I was asked to complete the equity survey. My teacher said that I could not skip any questions even when I didn't understand. One question asked us what gender phi we identified with. I was very confused along with a lot of other classmates. A boy in my class asked my teacher if his mom could explain the question to him because even after the teacher explained it, he still didn't understand. My teacher told him that he was not allowed to ask his mom and that we could not repeat any of the questions to our parents. I want the school board to know how uncomfortable and nervous this made me. My mom always tells me I can tell her anything, but she also tells me I can trust my teachers too. Being asked to hide this from my mom made me feel very uncomfortable. I was doing something wrong. Thank you.
So, why are public schools being inundated with BLM propaganda that is openly Marxist and steeped in critical race theory ideology? Why are teachers hanging up BLM and pride flags in their classrooms? Why are teachers having kids fill out equity surveys, then telling them not to tell their parents about it? This is all clear signs at attempts to indoctrinate kids. Young children in elementary school, 7-year-olds, being taught that white people are bad, white people are racist, that they're oppressing African Americans and Mexicans. And why is this being done at schools? Because it's the only place where they can target your kids when you're not around. And why do they want to target kids? Particularly white kids. It's because they want to indoctrinate them into these concepts at an early age. As soon as they can. to get them into the stage of white guilt as soon as possible, so these kids can overcome it, and therefore, when they become young adults, they will have moved past their white guilt in order to become full-blown activists for the woke cultural revolution. And this isn't my idea. This isn't my conclusion of what they're doing. This is coming from them, the people spreading critical race theory in the classrooms. Here is Jennifer Harvey to say just that.
I also think that, and there's some studies that have borne this out a little bit, that we don't actually, we have to support our classrooms and our student bodies in navigating racial tension if that starts to show up because white kids are feeling like, oh, I'm only always the bad guy. Like we have to, which is why we need those anti-racist models and to just have that conversation. But in terms of their development, this is going to sound really counterintuitive, especially if you're a parent. We actually, there's a number of studies that suggest we shouldn't be worrying too much about making white kids feel bad because they get so much false messages about their goodness that it's actually kind of critically important for them. Now, we don't want to induce shame, right? Which is why they need those models. They need to hear, say, yeah, white people can do racial justice too, right? Here's some examples. So we don't want to introduce shame, and there's a tricky line, and we don't want to cause racial tension where then they have no way to enter the diversity conversation. And so we need to talk about anti-racism with them. We need to give them those models. But we also actually need to, it's good for them to feel a bit, like white guilt is a really big problem. And my goal as a parent is to get my kids into white guilt and beyond it as young as possible. Because white adults are running around with white guilt, and we're stuck. White guilt has to happen. It's a developmental need. If you believe in equity and you live in this kind of system and you're white, you're going to hit white guilt. So in my mind, I'm like, I need my 4-year-old to experience white guilt so I can support her out of it and beyond it. And I don't want her doing it when she's 20. I want her to be well past that point.
They believe they have to do this, that they are even morally obliged to do this for the good of society. Because if they don't, if white children are not taught about race and racial issues, if parents don't actively intervene, white children may transform their normal human instincts into racism. Well, we know they don't really mean may. They 100% believe they will become racist. There is no may about it. White children need to be taught about these issues. They need to be made to feel white guilt. This is why white parents who believe in all this social justice, anti-racism, and white privilege garbage will debase their own children just to virtue signal how woke they are.
Black women are the reason that Donald Trump is no longer going to be our president.
All hail black women.
Because it's all about raising a new generation of white children that believe in this woke ideology of critical race theory and all the other nonsense that comes with it. As in doing so is the only way white children can remain human enough.
There's so much uncharted territory here, raising all of our children and figuring out how we raise a different generation of white children. We have had few models for that. It's scary, it's hard, we don't even have the language we need yet. But here's what we need to know. The most truthful questions about raising white children aren't about how we exactly map or measure our attempts to teach them about justice. The most truthful questions aren't the practical ones, about how we do it all just right. The most truthful questions simply have to do with whether or not we will decide to be brave. Whether or not we'll decide to be brave for the sake of all of our children. And so as much uncharted territory as it puts me in every single day, I'm convinced that this is the most life and future affirming choice we could make. Because it's the only way that white children remain human enough to recognize and fight for the humanity of their fellow humans whose lives are actually at stake today in the system we're living in.
This is the critical race theory that people are complaining about. This is the horribly evil ideology that is infecting schools and basically everything else. This is what countless parents across the country are pushing back against by going in front of school boards and telling them to stop or else. Yet, in spite of all the opposition to stop this, these woke activists disguised as teachers and administrators will say they aren't teaching critical race theory. That's a legal term used in law school. None of that is being done here. Well, that is just a semantic word game, the kind the woke left constantly engage in. Because, in the broadest sense, they are correct. They are not teaching critical race theory. They are doing critical race theory. They're enacting the theory by means of praxis, which is just a fancy term to mean put theory into practice. And this is what they're doing. They know they're doing it. They know that we know they're doing it. This is why, besides the gaslighting attempts to tell everyone this isn't what they're doing, school boards and teachers in some places are actively going after parents that oppose this anti-white indoctrination, even trying to organize in order to target, dox, and undoubtedly gather a woke mob to harass and cancel these parents, with some that defend this evil doctrine publicly saying that those that oppose it, like those parents, should just die, that people can't be allowed to deter them from their bold march forward.
Let's prepare our children for a world they deserve. Let's deny this off-key band of people that are anti-education, anti-teacher, anti-equity, anti-history, anti-racial reckoning, anti-opportunities, anti-health people, anti-diversity, anti-platform, anti-science, anti-change agent, anti-social justice, anti-healthcare, anti-worker, anti-LGBTQ+, anti-children, anti-healthcare, anti-worker, anti-environment, anti-emissions policy change, anti-inclusion, anti-live and let live people. Let them die. Don't let these uncomfortable people deter us from our bold march forward. Thank you.
So this is where we're at. Like everything else the woke cancer has infected, it seeks to dominate all life and turn everything towards its cause. In this case, it's our very children, with it being discovered over and over again that critical race theory influenced curriculum are being taught or being introduced into classrooms for kids. And while this video has been about white kids and this anti-white indoctrination, kids of all races are being propagandized by critical race theory. It's just that the non-white kids are being indoctrinated in the other direction, that they're being oppressed, that Western society was designed to be against them. It's all disgusting and needs to be opposed at every turn. At this point, everyone needs to seriously consider homeschooling if they're able. And if they're unable to, you'd better be super involved in what your school is doing, what its curriculum is, and who your child's teacher is. Because there's still good and honest teachers out there. Yet, like with everything else, those good teachers are being forced out and slowly replaced with woke activists. And they are bound and determined to turn your children into the social justice warriors they need to continue their bold march forward toward their communist utopia. Because, as Jennifer Harvey said, they need to raise a different generation of white children. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. You can find me on most social media sites talking about culture and politics. So do look me up and say hello. And take care and God bless.